I'm Isaac, and welcome to Stuff You Need to Know About Australian History. The 19th century is often remembered as a time of social progress and increasing material wealth in the first of Australia's long booms. While there is some truth in that, there was also a lot of discrimination at the time. Today's episode will look at both the positives and the negatives of the 19th century. There were two major causes of the long boom. The first was high demand for Australian wool. Australia's climate proved to be good for Spanish merino sheep, a breed renowned for the softness and whiteness of its wool. In 1830, the United Kingdom imported 74,500 bales of wool from Germany and only 8,000 bales from Australia. However, by 1850, the tables had turned, with the UK importing only 30,000 bales of wool from Germany and 137,200 bales from Australia. This high demand was accompanied by a shortage of workers, meaning labour was also in demand. This gave workers leverage for higher wages and shorter hours. The second factor was the discovery of gold in Victoria in 1851. This led to the famous gold rush, which served to further strengthen the Victorian economy. The long boom caused many changes in Australia. The high wages and short working hours earned Australia a reputation as a working man's paradise. This, coupled with the gold rush, saw Australia's population more than double between 1851 and 1861, with immigrants coming largely from the UK, US, China and Germany. The larger population meant a need for more infrastructure, political representation and land, further fuelling the economy. The gold rushes also led to the Eureka stockade. Tensions began to build between miners and the government because miners were required to pay a £10 fee for a miner's licence. They objected to having to follow laws that they had no say in, as only men who owned property could vote. The tensions came to a head over the murder of a miner in October 1854. The miners burned a pub belonging to the man they held responsible, and of the 5,000 miners involved, 3 were arrested, a number deemed way too high. The miners lobbied the governor, who responded by sending the police to oversee the fields in Ballarat and enforce the unpopular licensing laws. The miners rebelled, gathering on Baker Hill beneath the now famous Eureka flag on the 29th of November 1854 to burn their passes. When asked to present their passes the following day, the miners declared that they had been burnt and then marched back to Baker Hill. Once again under the Eureka flag, the miners followed stockade leader Peter Lalor in an oath. "We swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties." They then proceeded to slowly, one by one, get bored and go home. By the time the fighting started the next morning, only 150 of the initial 2,000 miners remained, and the fighting ended after 15 minutes. Despite this, the Eureka stockade would have far-reaching effects. By the time of the 1858 Victorian election, all white men could vote, and while that might seem dodgy by today's standards, back then it was a big democratic step forward. One has to remember though, these were the same people who couldn't be bothered seeing the Eureka stockade all the way through. Only 1 man in 8 actually bothered to drag himself out to the polls in that election. South Australia had already enacted universal white male suffrage in 1856, and New South Wales would in 1858 and Queensland in 1859. Other reforms, like the secret ballot, were adopted in many of the colonies, and in 1894 South Australia became the first place in the world where women could both vote and stand for Parliament. Unfortunately, racial discrimination remained a large part of colonial Australian life, with both New South Wales and Queensland practising a form of slavery known as blackbirding. Blackbirding was the practice of conning and kidnapping South Sea Islanders to work in Australia as forced labour in sugarcane fields. By 1904, 60,000 Pacific Islanders had been blackbirded, which is especially awful when one considers that slavery in the British Empire had been formally abolished in 1833. Also, racial hatred towards Asians would balloon during the mass immigration caused by the gold rushes. Furthermore, even though Aboriginal Australians have the right to vote in most colonies, it turns out you can't exercise a right you're not made aware of, and they would lose the right entirely shortly after Federation. Speaking of which, Federation will be the topic of next time's video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you then.